Are you a real estate investor looking to sharpen your skills or a newbie looking to become one? You're in the right place. Welcome to Where Should I Invest? Real Estate Investing in Canada with your host, Sarah Larbi.
Hey everybody, Sarah Larbi here. Welcome back to another episode of Where Should I Invest? I'm here with Tony Miller. He is my go-to for Ottawa and the surrounding area. Investor, realtor, has lots of great things, and we're going to have a great conversation today. But before, I must say, these are our opinions. If you like them or not, you agree or not, I mean, we'd love to hear from you as well, but these are strictly just opinions. And this is part of the uncensored. I want to, take a little bit of a step away from my regular podcast and just bring out some real information, some timely information. And if at the end of the day you guys don't agree, that's great. I mean, in a way, let's create some communication back and forth. So, Tony, welcome to the show.
Hey, Sarah, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Oh, great to be here, man. I'm good. We're chugging away here in Ottawa, and our family's doing well. Our kids are at home. One in Montreal came back to Ottawa to stay during the confinement period, or whatever you want to call it. Until things sort of relax and open up again. And business is good here. So everything's fine.
Awesome. So let's just take a quick step back for listeners who may not know you. Tell us a little bit about what you do and your background.
Sure. So I toiled in the federal government system for a good 24 years. And during that time, I started investing, about 2008. I started in the government about 1990. The federal government, and we just started, investing 2008. I made a ton of mistakes, and primarily working with the wrong realtors, thinking that I knew everything, thinking that, I've read the books, I've listened to the radio shows, I've read newspaper articles, I've talked to a few other investors. I thought I was ready to go. What turns out I didn't know crap. I didn't know anything. And lost some money, and I decided, okay, well, I'll revamp and restart. So I learned some stuff and surrounded myself with a better team, and rejigged and started investing multifamily res in the Ottawa area. And then I finally, the perfect storm kind of happened. I was getting tired of working in the government, and also I don't know if you've ever felt this way, but I was in there for so long, I felt like I didn't want to be on my deathbed thinking that I could have done so much more. That was really something in the back of my head, geez, there has to be more than getting up, 6 o'clock in the morning, taking the bus to work, and then come back at 5. There has to be something else out there. So I decided to take the leap, planned it for a couple of years while nobody knew. And that was probably the best part, Sarah. When you're planning something, but you don't tell anyone except your family.
That's interesting. For me, I actually broadcasted it, and it is what it is. But my work knows a lot about it. But I guess it can go both ways, right? You could have a supportive work, environment, and you can have one that's like, "What are you doing?" and not trust you type of thing. So that's interesting that you kept it to yourself for 2 years.
Yeah. It helped me get through some difficult times during work, because it wasn't really fun the last 4 or 5 years there, and when things were going off the rails, in the back of my mind, I just kept saying, well, hey, they don't know, what I'm planning and what I'm doing and what I'm moving towards. And that really helped me get through some of those situations. So finally in January 2014, I said, sayonara, I'm out of here, and became an investor-focused realtor in Ottawa area. And right now, focus mainly on private money lending. Not really, I just don't have the juice. I don't have the drive like I used to when you first start. I'm gonna own the whole world in terms of real estate, right? I'm gonna go out there and make that happen. Now I'm happy just lending some money out, making some returns. If something, if I were to get into something, it might be maybe self-storage, or maybe a large building with a couple of people here I know in Ottawa. But other than that, I'm sort of, I just don't have the drive like I used to have.
But you're also doing this for the freedom, right? I think a lot of people that get started, I mean, just like you, I'm like, there's got to be something more to life than just working for 30 years. And so if you don't need to do it and you don't need to hustle to the same extent because you've, put yourself in a position where you're happy and you're good with what you've got. I mean, I personally think at some point enough is enough, like in terms of wealth that you can accumulate and income that you can accumulate to be able to say, I'd rather have my time.
Absolutely. And you have to be happy with what you're doing. And if you don't know what you really want to do in the future yet, just give it some serious thought and, ponder it. Really try a bunch of different things, I think is the real answer. You really don't know. I tell my kids that, like, if you're not sure what you want to do, they're 19 and 22. And I know the 22-year-old, she's got her stuff figured out, what she wants to do. The first time, it's just like, go try a bunch of stuff. Go try it, go fail. It doesn't, like, if you try it once, you don't like it, great, don't do it again. If you like it, keep doing it. Maybe it's something you want to keep doing or branch out into a different area within that realm.
Yeah, absolutely. So I do want to go back though. You mentioned that you're loaning out money. How are you doing that? Like is it registered, not registered? What are the terms? Like walk us through that. Because there's probably some people that are, listening to this wanting to be a little bit more passive and they might have capital that they want to loan out rather than be the active investor.
Right. So I think the first thing that I would recommend for anybody, whether it's registered funds or not, the RRSP Secret is a tremendous book that will give you, some really good background. It'll tell you about 75% of what you need to know and how to do the due diligence piece, which is the most important part. For myself, I decided, well, if I'm going to lend money out, who would I lend the money out to? What kind of projects and where? And I figured, okay, well, I'm going to stick to the Ottawa area. I want 1 year terms, 1 year duration, I should say, right? First or second mortgage, if, depending on what was going on with the project. And there'd be people who I know and to people I trust and to people with a successful track history. So those are my three main points that I look for. And it turns out, I wasn't really getting into the large syndicate mortgages, it's really hard to do your due diligence with those puppies. How do you do that? And I didn't want to lock up my money for 5 years, or 3 years or anything longer. It turns out I decided to go with one. I decided, okay, I'll do that. And that's not really private money lending sort of thing. That's sort of like a longer term investment. Private money lending, to me, at least the way I view it, is, here I'm lending you money for a short period of time, an intermediate period of time, and I'm going to get some decent returns, take that money out and move to the next one. So the terms I'm looking for are, I can repay it anytime I want. We can renew it if we want to, right? And go for another year, 6 months, whatever. Of course, the borrower pays for all of my fees. So legal fees, if it's registered funds, they pay the Olympia monthly fees, the yearly fees, and every project is different in terms of interest. First or second position. Sometimes and I have to admit, Sarah, I don't know about you, but I don't do anything that's not registered or not registered against real property or something else. I've done it twice, and there were small amounts. It's a lot of money, but there were small amounts, like 5,000 and 15,000.
And you probably knew the investors as well. Yeah, I like to, same thing, make sure that I have something against the money that I'm loaning.
Yeah, like what's a promissory note? Like it means nothing.
Yeah, I know some people do it, but and because they want the higher fee, like the higher rates, right? So they might get 17%, and it's a shorter term, but it is definitely higher risk. And so personally for me, and I've moved because you can do this, right? The banks don't tell you that you can do this, and the advisors don't, because they're going to lose money, because essentially that's how they make their money, is off of the commissions from mutual funds, etc. But, like you mentioned, Olympia Trust, there's community trust. You can move your money in RSPs still in tax-free savings accounts, and then you can loan it out. And I think it's just great because you have more control. Like for me, so I've loaned, had 50, I have more than this, but 50 grand I've loaned out to one of my students that bought a property that I'm walking him through. So I'm like, I'd rather use my money for people that I know, and I didn't charge him points or anything. I charge 9%. He can pay back whenever he wants, but I'd rather do that than putting it into the stock market where in my opinion, I have A, not enough understanding of it, and B, not enough control over it. I'm like, if I can guarantee myself 9%, and I still have more money I want to loan out, I'd rather, loan it out to people that I know to help them as even a second mortgage, I'm fine with, as long as I know what the property is.
Yeah, totally. And it's, the interest rates are, you said 9%. Right now I'm getting anywhere between 11 and 22%.
Absolutely.
So
you could definitely charge more. I just, because there were students, I didn't want to go anything crazy.
Well, yeah, and that's awesome of you. That's great. It's nice of you to do that, and you're not taking advantage of people. It's just working out something that's comfortable and that helps you and helps them at the same time. Mm-hmm. And so I really enjoy doing it. And going back to the due diligence piece, it's something I don't think a lot of people do enough of, or a deep enough dive into, I find sometimes, right? Or they're scared to ask. If I'm lending money to a friend, well, okay, I know you and I trust you. However, right? Trust but verify or something. Is that the term that people use? So listen, I need to know this. Can you provide me with this? What's the project? Can you provide me with the financials? If I'm lending out 50, 60K or 25K, I want to know that stuff, right? It's hard-earned money. And anybody who sort of puts up a roadblock or a red, saying, no, I don't think I want to do that. Well, they're just not going to get my money.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's still hard-earned money at the end of the day. We still have to make sure that we don't just, loan it out too aggressively with the wrong person and the wrong deal. And I will say something as people are, might be hearing this for the first time, that you can actually take your RSP and loan it out as a mortgage. It does have to be transferred to Community Trust and Olympia Trust. And there's another one for Western Canada. I can't remember, like Western something. And you have to, at a minimum, charge whatever the prime is. And there's like a maximum amount of interest that you can charge as well. But 30%. There you go.
30. Yeah.
So you have to stay within certain guidelines, and it has to be as a mortgage. So you can't just do a promissory note with your RSPs. Like it has to be like a first or second. So, work with Olympia Trust, Community Trust, your lawyer, if you want your mortgage broker as well, and they can help you set it up, but there are some guidelines around it.
And 100%, if you're looking to lend money out, do not lend money out to the first person who comes to you and asks for money. Right? Mm-hmm. Get to know them. It's just like joint ventures. I'm sort of a relationship first type of person who did joint ventures. Get to know them first, learn how to do it properly, talk to Sarah, talk to somebody, and find out how to do it, and then make the move. There's no rush, right? You're going to have time to make it happen. Just learn to do it properly, minimize your risk.
Yeah, absolutely. Awesome. So I want to take a little bit of a different turn, and let's talk about landlords and tenants. And Tony, you're part of the committee with Kayla for the Ontario Landlords Watch, and I think there's about 10 to 12 of us that are working together to help landlords and create a voice and talk to the officials to be able to make changes. It's going to be a slow process, but I think you did some research on rent strikes and tenants paying, not paying. Can you share some of that insight?
Yeah, for sure. We did a presentation initially. This is probably beginning of first week of April or so. We did a presentation about the issues facing mom and pop landlords during COVID-19. And it surrounded primarily around poor government messaging. It could be the Prime Minister saying nobody should be worried about paying rent during COVID. Doug Ford saying no one's getting evicted. It could be that our Mayor Watson, telling people to use last month's rent to cover their expenses, which is not allowed in the RTA, right? If you look in, I think it's 106-10 is the article in the Residential Tenancies Act that doesn't permit that. So that's one thing. And there was also, because of the mortgage deferral, there were plenty of tenants who said, well, listen, my landlord, he doesn't have any expenses. He only pays a mortgage, right? That's the only expense we have, of course, as landlords.
Of course, we don't have taxes
Yeah.
or maintenance or insurance or any of that. That just disappears.
No, that just, yeah, it's like, yeah, it doesn't exist. So why should, some of the thinking was that they don't need to pay their rent because landlords don't have any mortgage payment, right? And of course, the mortgage deferral system is kind of, it's a bit of a cluster and hit and miss for many people.
It is. And keep in mind that, like, unfortunately, a lot of people jumped on that thinking that it was, just a deferral and there wasn't going to be interest on interest and there wasn't going to be any issues with it. But it turns out, I'm personally to the opinion, and just talk about mortgage deferral, if you absolutely need to do it because you're going to lose your house, do it. If not, find another way to make it work, because it's going to, as an investor and somebody that's listening to this, here's the thing. If you're a private lender, Tony, and you realize that your investor that's now asking you for money, private money, they've asked for a mortgage deferral. Like, I'm not comfortable with loaning them this if they're like, the first minute that they can defer it, they've gone and deferred it and claimed financial hardship. Second of all, how are they going to refinance? How are they going to buy more within that time frame? Like, regardless what it is, I think it's going to hinder that piece. And then there's always a risk because there's so many mortgages that got deferred. And I was on a webinar yesterday, and Scotia was saying it was like 15 or 17% of their total mortgages are now deferred. That's a big number, big number. And so, it's in a way, it's creating them to say, okay, well, while this is happening, we're going to say no more HELOCs for new sources of down payment, because all of a sudden all these investors started calling and tried to defer their mortgages. They're like, wait a minute, maybe this is not the best thing. But also, when they report this to the credit bureaus, they may or may not report it correctly. So check your credit scores along the way as much as possible, so that you don't have a ding on your credit if they reported it the wrong way.
100%, yeah.
You're paying interest on the interest, and your payments are going to go up at the end of the day.
Yes. You still, at the end of the day, have to pay. It's just the deferral. Unfortunately, some people thought it was just, okay, great, I don't have to pay for 3 months. And that's not the case. And my takeaway from the deferral programs, or any type of government program that comes into play, is always wait. They'll make the announcement, but they have no clue how it's going to be implemented at the lower levels, right? So you have to wait. And having worked in the government for 24 years, I'm pretty confident in saying this, that it takes time for everything to filter down and to be worked out.
Yeah.
And so don't jump on and sign up right away if you can. Like, just wait, see how things work out, and then wait to hear and find out from other people who have jumped in, and find out what the issues are, what the fine print says. And that's really important before you jump in.
Absolutely. So sorry, I interrupted you. You were talking about the whole tenant thing. Let's go back to that.
Yeah, you brought up some great points. That's awesome. So we did the presentations, and then we started, I did a survey through SurveyMonkey and posted it out to, I just like the name SurveyMonkey. I don't know why, I think it's cool. And decided it's totally unscientific, a survey of small landlords in Ontario, asking them how their rent collection went for April. I waited until after the 15th, I think it was the 20th when I started, because some tenants pay staggered, or on the 15th, not the 1st, that type of thing. And I will do the same for May. And the results were pretty good. I think overall, many landlords were surprised. I have some of the results here. Did you want to go over some?
Share them. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Now, question for you. Your investors that you're working with, have they all received their full payments?
Many of them have. Just give me 1 second here while I do this. Yes, they have been very, done very well. Let's put it that way. Very happy with what they saw in April, and in May so far. I'll jump ahead to May. I asked on Ontario Landlord Watch site and just on my own Facebook page how rent collection went for May, and wow, it was outstanding. It just looks like almost 95% of landlords received full rent payments from their tenants. The commercial tenants were a little bit different story, for sure, but the residential tenants looks to be pretty good so far. So I'm still going to send out that survey, and I'm happy to share them with you later on once it's all finalized. So just in terms of the survey, we surveyed small landlords because I don't think anybody else is doing it.
Right.
I know there are some other organizations doing the larger, the big guys, the big REITs, maybe commercial type of landlords. Excuse me. This is one of the presentations they did. The no Zoom overload is just, I told them it's going to be 10 minutes. I'm not going to keep you online for 2 hours to go over the results.
And for those of you guys listening on iTunes or Stitcher, etc., go to the YouTube channel if you want to actually see the survey in writing and then just the slides that Tony is sharing. We're going to try to be as descriptive as possible, though.
Yeah, thanks, Sarah. I forgot about that. And really, the primary use of this survey was to collect results and then share them with government officials, elected officials, to let them know what's happening out there and to influence them, hopefully, into saying, listen, small landlords need some financial assistance through COVID, because we're the only ones who pretty much aren't getting any financial assistance, right? We're being told there's no evictions, nobody can get kicked out. We become like the social housing for the government basically during this, right? And it's pretty tough. So I think that some financial assistance would be great, and hopefully this will influence them, or at least start to. I only put about 5 questions in this presentation, Sarah, so it won't take very long. One question asks, how many doors do you own in Ontario? Most of the people who responded said it was fewer than 10. Okay, so they're mom and poppers. They're not the big residential landlords. They're not the large commercial landlords. Pretty much under 10. There were a couple of people who responded, I think it was over 100, a couple of them. Some of them had 40, 20, but the majority under 10. Do you like my doors cover there? I thought that was pretty clever of me.
Yes, it's good. It's nice. So it's just like a picture with a bunch of random colored doors.
Yeah.
Doors.
Yeah. Now we asked also, where do you invest? And it's a wide area. I think I covered a good 75% of the towns that responded in the survey. Ottawa was the biggest because I'm from Ottawa and a lot of my peeps responded, but had a good representation from across the province, which is really good. That's what we're looking for.
You got Timmins, you've got Barrie, Niagara area, Oshawa, Brockville area, KWC, the GTA, Ottawa. So a lot of different landlords from different areas. That's good.
Yeah. Hey, what's KWC? What's the C?
Cambridge.
Oh, okay. So I should put Kitchener, Waterloo, Cambridge. Gotcha. All right.
Usually they go together. I know they're different. I know they're different, but we all refer to them as KWC.
So we wanted to set a timeline before COVID, so we thought, okay, let's ask about March before, everything sort of hit the fan. And I asked what percentage of tenants paid rent in full for March 2020? We had 171 respondents to this question. 84% of tenants paid their rent in full, according to the respondents. And that's, 83 to 84% is about the average in Ontario when we're looking about how many tenants pay rent in full every month. We did some calculations and that's the number we came up with. So that's about right, okay?
So that's already scary, because if you think about that, that means that 15% are either not paying anything at all to begin with, or partial payments. So they were already, in a way, so, like if you were a landlord with a tenant that was in the situation, you're already coming in behind the 8 ball.
100%. Yeah. Like it's like,
this goes back to screening tenants. This is exactly what you want to make sure that you avoid, is you don't want to be part of that 15% that's already not getting paid even prior to COVID, as an example.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And tenant screening is important. And I think it's, the 16%, N4s, whatever notice was issued, It's so hard, right? You don't want to be within that group. Let's see. So that's question 3. Question 4, what percentage of tenants paid rent for April 2020? So we had 170 respondents compared to 171 for the previous question. So out of the 170, 110 landlords received 100% of April rent. And then out of the remaining 60 landlords, 68% of tenants paid rent in part or full. What do you think of that?
I mean, I want to say I'm not surprised, unfortunately. I also have heard, so like I think CIBC did a study and it was like 15% or like 85%. Again, like there's definitely landlords out there that are striking. There's definitely, tenants out there that are striking. And then there's definitely tenants that unfortunately can't pay the rent, maybe because you have some areas there, like the GTA, like those rents are probably more than 2,000. So, you know, they've lost their jobs and they were already paycheck to paycheck. And then all of a sudden CERB kicks in. Well, it really doesn't cover it all in full. So
no.
It is unfortunate because that's a big, so it went from 80, you said 84% of tenants paid rent in full to 68.
That's right.
Wow.
That's a big drop.
It's a big drop. What's your take on it?
I think the number is it's a big drop, and I think partly it does have to do with perhaps tenant screening is very important. And I know you're a big advocate, right, of showing people how to.
That's like pretty much the only big control that we have.
It is, yeah, absolutely. And the next screen will break down the reasons why. Now I do know that like in BC, some of the percentages are even lower, at least in some of the reports that I saw. I read a couple of articles, and so it was even lower than this. And keep in mind that BC, they are getting a rent subsidy of $500. Mm-hmm. Not that it helps, but it's not going to cover rent, of course, and all the other expenses.
No, and tenants don't think that that's all they have to pay, right? As well, they'd be like, oh, you know what? The city's helping my landlord. I don't have to worry about it. They're getting $500. They can defer the mortgage. Like that's, I mean, I don't know, but I'm thinking some tenants are probably having that mentality, just like the tenants here have some type of mentality. Some of them about not paying if they don't need to, put food comes.
Oh yeah. The lack of understanding of how real estate works and how property ownership works and the expenses and all that stuff, like it's limited, right? Yeah, a lot of people own homes and people rent, but the actual understanding of how real estate works, real estate investing works is pretty low. At least that's what I found through this survey.
Yeah, that's also in a way why, we're the top 1%. Is because a lot of people don't understand it. A lot of people don't get into real estate, and a lot of tenants, will just be tenants for a long, long, long time, or maybe homeowners at one point. But, the people that take the time to learn about real estate and real estate investing, I mean, that's very minimal.
Yes.
And I can't remember what the stats were, but like there is a percentage of people, like, I don't know, maybe like a handful of a percentage that had a second house. And then once you get like past 2 and 3, like it goes from like 1%, 0. Like we are such a small minority. And I just don't remember the stats, but it was such a minority that like anybody that has like over 5 is like 0.0 something, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And this is why, and I think in a way that the government is not thinking so much about us, because they're like, there's such a small percentage of people. We get our votes from tenants. We get our votes from the middle class, the homeowners, etc.
Yeah. And yet small landlords provide 49% of the rental housing stock.
Yeah. Can you say that again? Because I think that's really important. And that's a key takeaway.
49% of the rental stock is provided by small landlords. So mom and pop landlords who own something less than 15 doors, maybe a few properties, that type of thing.
Yeah. So in a way, we are helping with the whole housing shortage issue But unfortunately, I don't think we get the recognition and the,
No,
the
no.
help from the government, because the rest of it is what, large landlords, lords, and then, social housing.
Yes, not for profit as well. And, it really, we're easy whipping. We're easy whipping for elected officials and for people out there. So we definitely have a lot of work to do to change the public perception about landlords in general, but especially the small landlords, and try to turn the vilification of landlords in the media continues, and we've seen that last year in Ottawa with Airbnb and long-term rental bylaws, and now with COVID. And we see a lot of pro-tenant. Heck, the Ottawa Citizen published a full-page op-ed for one of the rent strikers. Maybe it was paid for, I don't know, but like what? It kind of irresponsible, I'd say. But yeah, I'll move on to the next slide here. All right, question number 6. Why didn't the tenants pay April 2020 rent in part or in full? So earlier I had mentioned the comments made by Prime Minister Trudeau, Doug Ford, and that's our mayor. If you're watching on the video on YouTube, that's Jim Watson in the top left. He's the one who said, use your last month's rent to help cover expenses.
And I want to just emphasize, and I know you said that you can't do that. You can't, just don't do it, because that is that for last month's rents. That really needs to be used for last month. So, again, if you do that at the board, it just really complicates a whole lot of stuff. I don't know, Tony, if you want to add anything or add any comments to that, but I would just say, don't do it. It's not supposed to be for when they can't pay. It really needs to be for the last month.
Yeah. Once you spend it, it doesn't look good at the board if you're going there. Like you've already dug your hole, and there's no guarantee that the tenants will be able to pay you last month's rent back, at a future date if they stick around. Then what do you do when last month's rent comes around? Maybe you need that last month's rent at the time. It's just, don't do it. Don't have to do it at all. Another reason I mentioned the mortgage deferral issue, right? Some tenants said, "Hey, man, I don't need to pay rent. You're not paying any mortgage. Why should I pay rent?" The Landlord Tenant Board in Ontario, most eviction hearings are not being heard. They're just put off. And so those were the main reasons. But then we look at the numbers, Sarah. Here we go. Here's some good numbers. I don't know if everyone can see that.
Let's just be descriptive and walk through each one.
You got it. So again, the question is, why didn't the tenants pay April rent in part or in full? The number one reason was loss of employment at 19.5%. So these are people who legitimately lost their employment, lost their jobs because of COVID-19. These are the people who, as landlords, we want to help, right? We want to work with them. It's not their fault that COVID hit. It's not their fault they lost their jobs. They're not doing it maliciously. So these are the people that we're trying to help as much as we can, even though we have limited funds and limited resources. You try to work something out with them. So loss of employment was numero uno. I'm going to go in order of percentage size, okay? And the number two reason why tenants didn't pay, and this one sort of kind of surprised me, kind of didn't, was because of comments made by the Prime Minister, the Premier, and Municipal Mayor. So pay food before paying rent. No one should be evicted during COVID. No one should have to worry about paying rent. Those type of messages really resonated with the masses, with the tenants, and 11.6% of tenants didn't pay rent for these reasons. That's pretty high, eh?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me a little bit angry that, unfortunately those landlords have to be explaining, why those comments were made, or how they were not right. And it's a he said, she said. This is the stuff that unfortunately gets mentioned in the media and people say it, and then these are the consequences of what happens.
Yeah, words matter when they come from elected officials. And I know I was pretty active in asking local officials at least to, be careful with their messaging and please put out messages like this. And I give them examples. Didn't work that well, but at least we tried. Now the next one, in terms of percentage, the next reason why tenants didn't pay rent was because of the landlord tenant board being somewhat closed or not processing evictions, and that was at 10.3%.
So again, taking advantage of the system.
Yep, 100%. And then the next one, if I'm looking here, okay, well, some people, this is another case of legitimate reasons, is that the tenants were still employed, but they lost income. So their hours were cut, perhaps. Yeah, I guess that's probably the primary reason.
So this is probably a lot of people that paid partial, as an example.
What's that? Sorry?
A lot of these tenants probably paid partial.
Yes.
Out of that 8.54%.
Exactly.
That lost some of income.
Yeah, 100%. So again, that's a legitimate reason. They're not doing it on purpose and trying to hurt landlords or anything like that, or anybody else. It's just you try to help them as much as you can, and that's all you can really do. Mm-hmm. Then we moved to the mortgage deferral program was next in line at roughly 8% of the people responded saying that's why tenants didn't pay their rent in full or in part. And
so because of the perception that they're like, well, my landlord can defer their mortgages for 6 months. I shouldn't have to pay rents if they can defer their mortgage. And unfortunately, they don't realize, first of all, whether a landlord has a mortgage or not is none of their business anyways, but there's other expenses. There's a lot of maintenance, taxes, insurance. I mean, you name it, like there's other expenses that we factor in. It's not just the mortgage.
There's so many more expenses. And I think you nailed it. Bluntly, it's none of their business. It's none of their beeswax, right? I'm here to provide you with some housing. You either want it or you don't. And I'm not getting into my financial details with you. It's none of your beeswax. Mm-hmm. Move on if you don't like it. That's basically where I'm at with it.
Yeah.
Then finally, I think we're at the last one. Now, this is the last one that I really paid close attention to in April. We noticed that there was a lot of momentum out there for them, and people were sending me some screenshots of some of the comments being made within the rent striker groups. And I thought they were going to have a larger impact, at least in April, because they had a lot of momentum, it seemed, built up. And maybe they didn't have as much as I thought. So they came in at only 3%, which is great. Now, 3%, that, there are still landlords out there who are being hurt by them. And it's unfortunate that it's happening, but in the grand scheme of things, they haven't had that much of an impact. Now, if you're wondering what a rent striker is, I break them down into two groups. One of them being the group that are perhaps they're more on the communist side, left-wing anarchist, who don't believe in private ownership at all. And they're really using COVID as a way to hurt people and to push forward their agenda. That's really what they're about. And then the second group of rent strikers, and they're pretty organized as well, the rent strikers, have to admit, the first group. And then the second group are really the people who fall in, what the other groups, like what the Premier said, what the Prime Minister said, the mortgage deferral, property tax deferral, the LTV. I still group them in as rent strikers, but they're just using those reasons for not paying rent. Okay. So 3%, Sarah, not that big of a hit. We'll see what happens in May and June. If things don't improve, let's say, then maybe they will have more momentum and more people joining their groups. Like one Facebook group has something like 3,000 or 4,000 members.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you know what? So I look at this, and this is what my thoughts are. And just like in general, right? There's that small percentage of horrible tenants to begin with. It's probably
Yep.
in there. And then there's a horrible small percentage of horrible landlords, probably similar as well. Like I think the majority of, and I always said 5%. 5% are bad both ways, right? Goes both ways. But my bigger concern is a lack of proper information. So you've got, tenants that, realize that you can defer your mortgage and think that that means that they don't have to pay. Let's call that 8%. And then you've got your tenants that heard the prime minister or the mayor saying, don't worry about, rent. Let's call that another 12%. So that's almost the same amount of people that are not paying based on misinformation versus the people that truly just lost their employment. It's essentially like 20% for each, right? So that, to me, that's concerning, is the fact that the media sends the wrong messages, they get interpreted a certain way, and this is a 20% cause from that. This is the effect from that. To me, that's concerning. The rent strike thing, yes, it was scary, I think, before April 1st. You probably know at this point in time if you're rent striking, you have tenants that are rent striking or not. But my bigger concern is, oh my God, this lack of information is actually just quite unfortunate.
It is. And it goes back to, I think it's the number one of the primary things that we need to change is the perception, the information that's put out there, and, change the perception that all landlords are scuzzy and, not good people, that type of thing. Because, it shows right here. It definitely does. It's time to change that narrative for sure.
Yeah, and you know what the thing is, like you said, is that 49% are small landlords. So that could be 2 houses, 3 properties, et cetera, just a small number. Or, they have a full-time job and they have the 1 or 2 properties to help them so that they don't have to necessarily only rely on the government when they're retired. So a lot of these people are just regular people. Like we're not just, sitting in cash and being like, I don't have to do anything. Like a lot of the landlords probably lost their job too and are on CERB, just like the tenants. And I think there's got to be that realization from many of them to say, like, they're no different. They've just taken a little bit more risk. And instead of investing in paper assets, they decide to invest in brick and mortar. That really is like a choice that people make. Like I can invest in whatever I want. If I don't want to invest in paper assets because I believe that real estate is the better way, and I do, it doesn't make, like in the beginning, like when I had 1 or 2 houses, I was still working and I needed that income. Now I don't need the income and, it's a different story. But when you're first starting, and the majority of these small landlords don't have 15 properties, don't have 10 properties, they'll have like 1 or 2 or 3, and they need their income to still support it. Because here's the thing, in Ontario, with the mortgage, the taxes, the insurance, the vacancy, et cetera, like the cash flow is not that good. It really isn't. You're banking on mortgage pay down, you're banking on overall appreciation over time, not short term. And then the cash flow gets better, in my opinion, as tenants move out and you can reset back to market rents. That's where I'm going from $200-300 cash flow to, $600, $700, $800, because I bought that property. My tenants moved out after 3 years. Now I can up the rents. That to me is where I'm making my money. And this is why when I screen my tenants, I don't want them staying there forever, because I need them to move so I can get back to market rents.
Right. Totally makes sense. Yeah. And looking at these numbers as well, the primary thing that I take away from this is that mom and pop landlords take much more risk than some of the longer term landlords who have been around for a long time, long-term investors. They have less room for error, and it's really important for them to have success when they first start out with their first and second property, so that they can buy more should they choose. In Ottawa, the city, one of the councillors pushed for calling a housing and homeless emergency in Ottawa, which is definitely true. Like there's no doubt about it. So in order to fix the housing piece, and including affordability and availability, is to encourage and entice people to become small landlords, to build more rental stock, to do conversions, maybe convert your basement into a legal suite, maybe add a coach house or a tiny home or something along that lines, and build more rental stock, because the overall vacancy rate is below 1 here in Ottawa. So, and it's not going to improve anytime soon. So what's going to happen is that we look at these numbers, and if I'm a new landlord, Sarah, and I'm coming in, and then this happens, and I realize that the government doesn't have my back, the RTA doesn't have any teeth to it, the landlord tenant board sucks, and at least in my view, if you're a new landlord coming in, well, the tenants don't give a crap either. Like, some of them are rent striking. Why am I getting into this business? The heck with it. I'm not going to build anymore. I'm not going to rent out places anymore. I'm going to go invest somewhere else in something different. Therefore, taking rental housing off the market, which of course will lower supply and increase rent, which is the opposite of what's needed. So it makes it's in the local officials, the provincial best interest to work with us to help change the narrative about small landlords and to improve our situation. In the end, it hurts the housing supply, and we're in dire need of rental supply here in Ottawa.
Yeah, and I think those effects won't actually be felt for a while, but they are slowly happening, right? I mean, here's the thing: is I would not be here if it wasn't for real estate investing. I'm happy that I got to where I am today. Have I had a couple tenants that were iffy? Absolutely. This is why you build the processes over time, and just to, screen out as much as possible. And you help with, you build processes for the management part if you're self-managing. But I could see somebody that's thinking about, should I go into investing in stocks? Should I go into Bitcoin? Should I go into real estate? Real estate seems like a lot more of a headache. Is it actually worth it?
Yes.
I personally know that it is, just because I can see what I've been able to do, and I would have never been able to do that in paper assets. However, it does take time to learn it. It's not like you're just like making a quick transfer on your computer and, hope for the best type of thing. Like, it's definitely a little bit more hands-on. I would say a lot more hands-on if you're active.
Yes.
Tony, like, if you're loaning out your money now, you're a little bit more passive. You can do that as well, which I still think is a better option, because you can at least determine the rate that you want and the terms that you want. But as a new landlord, or somebody that's just thinking about getting started, like, I mean, I wouldn't blame them if they're like, should I actually start in Ontario or should I go and start somewhere else? And I still believe in Ontario. I still think the market fundamentals absolutely make sense.
Yeah.
And, over time, I think I will do better in Ontario than going to Alberta. That's just my take, just because of the market fundamentals.
Yeah.
But, it's definitely not for everybody. There's ups and downs, and there's good and bad. And, unfortunately, the tenants can play a big part into your success, especially at the start. Once you have a few properties over time and you've got the, odd bad one here and there, it's not a big deal if you've got to go to the board and, one of your units is not paying. But when you first start, that would be a tough one.
It is. It's tough financially, and it's tough emotionally. It just pulls the juices from you, and you're saying, screw it. Why should I do this? And, nowadays, like when I started back in 2008 or something, there wasn't as much online information or as many groups and clubs and that type of thing out there to help people. And if you're looking to get into real estate investing, like, take the time and immerse yourself in organizations and groups, and talk to people, and heck, hire a coach if you have to, like, to get through, or work with an investor focused realtor to help you get through those first few properties. Because we'll tell you that, no, that property sucks. It's not for you. It's not the right thing for you. Do you want to move on to the next one?
Sure.
Okay. All right. This one actually brought up a lot of discussion when I posted it on Facebook. Question 8 is, how are you handling vacancies right now? So I just wanted to find out, what's going on. Like, I had heard that some landlords weren't filling vacancies. And the reason why they weren't filling vacancies was because of the risk of finding tenants who may not be able to pay, who may lose their jobs, lose their income, or maybe they're one of the rent striker groups or tenants. So they just felt that the risk was too high. So that's why I asked this question. And I was really surprised at the numbers. 70% came back and said, yes, I'm filling or attempting to fill vacancies. 30% said that they are leaving their units vacant. And I found that really high.
Yeah, but if you don't have the right tenant, those people are smart to just hang tight and just wait and then do their due diligence after the fact. But my thoughts are, if you don't have the right tenant, I would rather leave mine vacant as well, and and slowly look for the right one. I filled one of mine for May, and she had sold her house and she was closing on it, and so I was obviously did due diligence. I was comfortable with her. She's great. But if I didn't find her, I actually probably would have waited.
Really, eh?
Yeah. Yeah, because I want to see how people handle this time, and I want it's a tough situation. Like, I think I'm in a lucky position that if I have it vacant, I'll be fine, right? I would rather take my time than to fill with the wrong person.
Yes, and you have the financial ability to do so.
Yeah.
And so I'm thinking, okay, if this was a survey for mom and pop landlords who may not have the financial ability, some are still working or may not be working because of COVID. And that's why I was a bit surprised by 30%. So maybe I'll ask you, like, how much does this have to do with a lack of faith in their tenant screening ability?
I mean, I'm sure it's half and half. Like, the other thing that I'm thinking of is, in addition to them not 100% maybe knowing how to find the right tenants and screen through it, I think part of it is showing the property. Are tenants really looking? Are they actually showing up to the property? How do you handle showing the property with them in there, with everything that is happening with COVID and the health concerns around that? I think that's probably a portion too.
Yep.
And then just hearing all the media stuff and people not wanting to deal with those tenants that are on rent strike, or listening to the government about not having to pay rents. So I think it's probably a mix of many things.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts?
No, I agree with what you said. All three. It's usually not just one thing. It's usually a combination of things. And I didn't ask why they aren't filling the vacancies. So I will ask that for May. And I'll be asking like the same question, so we'll be able to at least, track and see trends. So yeah, I agree with you. It's a combination of things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Last one.
By the way, you skipped question 7 and 9, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I left them out because they weren't. Yeah, I'm new to SurveyMonkey, and I couldn't figure out how to get the charts out.
No, that's okay. I'm like, I just want to make sure I'm following along. Okay.
Yeah. Sorry. So question 10 is taking into account measures such as mortgage deferrals, property tax deferrals, utility cost deferrals. Will you require financial assistance from the government in order to carry your properties over the next 3 to 4 months? Okay, pretty straightforward question. So 57.3% responded saying it's just too early to tell. And that was expected. I wasn't expecting something super, and yeah, this was pretty much what I thought. No at 25.7%, and roughly 17% said yes, they will require assistance despite the other programs that are already in place.
It's 17%. So that's interesting, because when Scotia was talking, that was like, it was 15 or 17% of mortgages that got deferred.
Okay. Yeah. So too early to tell. So again, we'll find out in what the results will be in May. And we'll see if that number of too early to tell decreases or increases. We'll see what the confidence level is like.
You know what I am concerned about though? Like, and this doesn't shock me. Like, this was done for April, right? So it makes sense. It was likely too early at that point in time. But the yes part, the 17% that say yes, I mean, if you buy a piece of property, like, especially if it's your first one or your first two, have like 3 to 4 months. I mean, this is a great, like, learning and a great chart for people to have a buffer of 3 to 4 months of expenses. per property. I mean, as you scale and you have more properties, you probably don't need the same exact amount, but as you're having 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, have 3 months of expenses in there, because you never know what's going to happen.
That's right. Yeah, it's really important when you're buying property. I'm the type who, a lot of people use 4 months of mortgage payments and property taxes and put that into the reserve fund and keep adding to it. I'm the type, I just take frig it. Here's 20K, pop it in. I don't run the numbers or whatever. I just know based on the property and how the condition of it and where it's located and all that. Here, I'll just put it in there. It's really, really important to take the cash flow that you have, what you make, and put it aside. Right? I can't stress that enough. How many people, I work primarily with newer investors or ones who are just starting out. And the number of times I hear people say, oh, I want to live off my cash flow. And I honestly don't know many people or any people who are living off their real estate investment portfolio cash flow alone for day-to-day living and for everything. They always have multiple streams of income. And if it's really important to put money aside too, if you're getting cash flow, great, put that into reserve fund, because you're going to have capital costs down the road. You're going to have things that happen. I've had a place in Halifax burn down, unexpected. Thank God I had some reserve funds, right? Because insurance will help, but it doesn't cover everything. Trust me. You're still going to pull some money out of your own pocket or out of your reserve to make it to support it. So I can't stress that enough.
Yeah, 100% agree. I mean, all of this is a good wake-up call, I think, for a lot of people. But also, it could be a reassurance for those that planned for the good and for the bad as well.
Yeah, for sure. That's it. That's the survey.
That's awesome. Well, thanks so much for sharing that. I mean, this is insightful. I'm really interested to see what the May is like. If you have that, it'd be great to have you share that. Tony, obviously you've been in real estate for a while. Like, what's some advice that you would give to the investors today for how to handle the next 6 to 12 months?
I think that if you're a seller, my advice is, if you own properties and you're thinking of selling, don't sell. Ignore, and I've said this before on different webinars and podcasts, ignore the headlines. There's a lot of fear out there. Just ignore it. Ignore the realtors who may be pressuring you to sell or want you to sell. Don't sell. And forget about the investors that come knocking and saying, hey, you should sell, or I want to buy it from you. If you bought your property based on economic fundamentals and in a good location, and you remember why you bought it in the first place, hold on to it, right? Property values and the real estate market, if you bought in the right place, generally, it's not going to crash. There's no bubble sort of thing. Yes, the values may drop depending on your market, but don't sell. Talk to somebody who understands the market, who works with investors, and someone you trust, and get some real legit information before doing anything. If you need to sell, if you have to sell, then go ahead. But maybe there's other ways you can hold on to your property through creative real estate means. Okay, there might be some other ways to do that. If you're a buyer, right now in Ottawa, heck, things are over the last week have gotten busier in Ottawa for sure, in terms of the number of listings and sales and all that type of stuff. I'm not expecting to see that many deals. Remember at that first, Sarah, we were thinking, okay, well, there's going to be a lot of people losing their properties, are going to have to sell. Now that we're this far into it today, now my opinion may change in a month or so, but as of today, I don't think that there's going to be a ton of them. It's not going to be like the Wild West of, woo, here's some properties that we can buy below market and rent out. I just don't see that happening right now.
Not in our markets anyways, right? So like, I don't know about Alberta. I can't talk about Alberta and what's happening with the, that whole industry. I mean, it's just very reliant on the oil and gas, et cetera. And, kind of what's happening with oil. But I tend to agree with you. We haven't seen prices drop yet. Again, we're recording this right now. It's the beginning of May. By the time it airs, it might be 6 weeks later. However, I also don't see rents really dropping. And I know that like I've seen some stats where like they're dropping by like 3% or so. Like it might just, be the types of properties, et cetera. Like it's hard to really say that rents are going to drop. I'll tell you, I'm not dropping any of mine. I, just had a tenant that I filled, like I mentioned, the prior tenant was paying $15.45. This new tenant's paying $17.95. And I didn't get any requests for lowering any of that. But I think regardless, like you said, the vacancy rates are so low where we are. And if anything, if people have to sell, then they're going to need to live somewhere. So if somebody's selling something, they're going to rent something, or they're going to buy something else. But I also don't see any, and again, I don't know for sure, but I don't see any big changes until CERB is done and mortgage deferrals are resumed. If we're going to see something, it'll be in that 4 to 7 month mark, I think.
Yeah. Or maybe we get a big second wave of COVID. We just don't know, eh? And I think in terms of like the rents, I think you really have to break it down to the type of tenants, your tenant profile. Like in Ottawa right now, it's trying to find students is very difficult. It's not impossible, but it's very difficult. I have a vacant 4-unit available for anybody who's watching, and also Airbnb. Though Airbnb in Ottawa, it is like it's busy. They seem to be doing like 30-day contracts are really popular, but I do know that they've had to adjust their cost, their rent as well.
Yeah, I mean the whole Airbnb thing. Actually, just yesterday they were saying that Airbnb had to lay off a lot of their workforce. So I mean they're likely predicting that the travel in and out of the country, as an example, the tourism will be reduced, which I can see. Until this is over, because even if we go back to work, I mean, we're not necessarily reopening our borders to the same amount to all the same countries, et cetera. So I think, the Airbnbs that will do well. I can see my cottage doing really well. People are likely not going to want to get out of the country to travel this summer. They may just rent out a cottage, but I can also see Airbnbs doing well for, like you said, like the 30 days to 60 days, people needing a place while they're waiting for their home to be closed, or divorces. So they're looking at something short-term before they find their more permanent, likely cheaper, longer-term rent housing. So I think there's gonna be some opportunities there. With Airbnb, I think the investors that just banked on Airbnb and didn't have a backup plan, and had, many, that they were running through that Airbnb strategy that were expensive and they were also getting high rents, those people may be in trouble. So I could see some of those investors potentially not being able to sustain that market and having to sell. And is there going to be more long-term? Are those going to be converted to long-term? I don't know. If somebody's was Airbnb and that's what they wanted to do and they didn't want to deal with long-term tenants, I think they're probably just going to sell. And maybe a small percent will change them to long-term, but.
Yeah. Well, the many short-term rentals, the numbers won't work as long-term rentals.
Yeah.
Anyways, right. The cost and the expenses, it just doesn't have any cash flow for somebody, perhaps. So I know that happens, and also the regulations that are in place. In Ottawa, they're still working on writing the bylaw. I don't know. I think that most people will, or I won't say most, but many people, I've already seen some, they're selling their short-term rentals. It could be single family homes or townhomes. What's interesting though, when it comes to Airbnb, we look at hotels and they're really just like, there's not a lot of people staying at hotels right now because of lack of tourism. And honestly, who wants to stay in a hotel during COVID with all that air being transferred to everybody, all that type of stuff, and you're in proximity with everybody else if they don't have kitchens. And I think that's one reason why Airbnbs, at least in Ottawa, the 1 month, the 2 month type of thing that you mentioned, seem to be working, because we have a lot of military people, we have embassy staff, embassy workers who, military transfers who need places to stay. And a lot of home healthcare people as well who work in the hospitals, they don't want to go home and infect their families. So they're renting Airbnbs to stay at during COVID.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And just go back to the hotels, like not all hotels, but I did hear some of them were housing the homeless.
Yes.
So if they're housing the homeless, I mean, okay, people don't hate me, but how many bed bugs is that going to create for that hotel?
Yeah.
And other problems, of course, but I'm just thinking like that whole sanitary piece, and you know what, how are they going to be dealing with that once this is all over?
Sarah, that's a whole podcast in itself, eh? It's like the movement is hotels to homes. So the cities are looking at purchasing vacant hotels or motels and provide housing to the homeless. So there's a lot of work that has to go finding hotels, motels that are open to selling, retrofitting the rooms at a large cost, of course, has to be done. But if you've ever owned any type of rooming house, which is really a transitional home for people coming out of shelters and the likes, you really, in my opinion, anybody who owns a rooming house needs to have healthcare workers on their team, right? And pay them to be there, because your tenant profile, that's who you're servicing, that's who you're helping. They're not, they need the support. So when they go into hotels, well, where's that support going to come from? And you're right, there's a whole bunch of other challenges where there is a higher percentage of bed bugs and mental health issues and addictions that have to be looked after. Do you bring kids into that situation?
Right.
Okay? I'd be worried about the single moms or the mothers and their children going into that situation. Is that someplace to be? I don't know. I'm not an expert in that, in healthcare or anything like that, but those are just my initial thoughts.
Absolutely. Tony, I mean, it's been wonderful. I'm just looking at the time. I think we've been talking for like an hour and 15 minutes. And
awesome.
Usually these podcasts are like 30, 40 minutes, but it's just so much information and so you have so much knowledge and insights, and thank you for putting together the survey and sharing the data. Where can my listeners find out more and reach out to you?
Facebook. Just Google Tony Miller Facebook, or if you're on Facebook, just check me out, send me a friend request. Just let me know that you listen to the podcast, Sarah's podcast, or you watch it on YouTube, and then I'll say, yeah, man, let's become friends.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Tony, for being on the show. It was a pleasure.
Welcome, Sarah.
You're
Thanks
welcome
for having me.
Anytime. Thanks.
Yeah. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.
So that was my interview with Tony Miller. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Keep in mind, I am available if you have any questions. My website is sarahlarbi.com. You can send me an email at sarah@sarahlarbi.com. And there are some new courses that you can take online. There's some group coaching available as well. And if you have any questions, again, you can reach out to me. And then also on Instagram at Investor Sarah Larbi. Thanks for those who rated the show, left a review. Thank you. If you haven't yet, if you wouldn't mind doing that would be greatly appreciated. I just got a couple new ones in the last week, so thank you to those that set something through. It makes my day and makes these podcasts awesome. It'll help gain more viewers, and thank you very much, guys, for your support. So hopefully everyone's doing well during this time, and this is a good time to think about not only relying on one source of income. Your job could be here today, could be gone tomorrow. The company could be here today, could be gone tomorrow. Take control over your own financial wealth, your own future. I would say, COVID, I mean, it sucks. This whole economic, freeze, it sucks, but it is so much more bearable when there is more than one source of income. Real estate investing has got me there. And for you, it could be something like real estate investing, and also you could start a business. But just keep in mind that you want that control, because this will be something new in 3 years, something different in 5 years, and if you're not in the position that you want to be at today listening to this, make sure that the next time around, if your job decides to lay you off and you're on CERB right now, that next time this happens, you don't need to worry about that. So on that note, guys, thanks for tuning in and see you next week.
Thanks so much for listening to Where Should I Invest with your host, Sarah Larbi. Make sure to listen in next time. We'll catch you on the next episode of Where Should I Invest?